Our episode today commences with Alicia, who was overjoyed because Galgada had dispatched her lavish presents in anticipation of her nuptial. She drew near and discovered exquisite objects beside that peculiar avian creature. When she unsealed the container and beheld those astonishing items, shimmering pieces that appeared costly, at that juncture, Prince Ozra entered and instructed them not to handle those presents or unwrap them, as they might be obligated to return them. Subsequently, the attendants departed, and the prince conversed with Alicia, then addressed her by her genuine name, Nina. He conveyed to her that this diadem doesn't befit her, but she appears lovely in anything, which made Alicia extremely disconcerted, and she couldn't retort. He apprised her that he would dispatch a diplomat to Galgada to negotiate about terminating the betrothal, as he would endeavor diligently to avert the union. He desired her to remain here perpetually. At that instant, she grasped his hand and embraced him from behind, yearning to remain with him, as she had become enamored with him, and he reciprocated the sentiment after 4 days. The day of departure arrived, but it appeared there was still one predicament that hadn't been resolved. They still didn't know who was attempting to assassinate Azure. We observe Alicia extremely apprehensive. Then she recollects the elderly woman's pronouncements that Alicia could safeguard Azure. She becomes exhilarated and declares, "Since I am the sole individual who can shield him, I will do my utmost hereafter." We see Alicia seated with the youthful prince, that small boy, Mahulam, but he doesn't recognize she is Nina, so he presumes that Alicia seated with him is his sibling. He informs her that he has heard about the magnificent gifts that have arrived for her, but he perceives her utterly anxious. He inquires her about the gifts she received, as they had mentioned that they were numerous items, gowns, some jewels, and a delightful bird, in addition to a precious set of shot are crafted from gleaming green gemstones. At that moment, the king's spouse, that malicious woman, enters and remarks to her, "What a gullible, inattentive girl you are. Don't you comprehend you're marrying for those presents? But let's address the matter directly. What do you wish to discuss?" Alicia informed her. "Fine, I will speak with you, and this pertains to Azure. What are you endeavoring to do with Azure?" The queen responded that it was insignificant. She had merely left a nail projecting. She stated that when Mahulam becomes king, Azor would profit as his counselor, and "I am certain of that. There is no space for uncertainty about this affair. His presence alongside Mahulam would benefit him immensely. He undeniably requires him. I simply remind him not to entertain any peculiar notion." Alicia then spoke to herself, saying that this signifies the queen doesn't truly believe he is a bother. She doesn't appear to be prevaricating. Then she depicts the man she observed with elevated eyes and a curved spine, a man she hadn't observed since the Star Festival. She then ponders to herself how her reaction would be. The queen informed her that, "The man you portray is Lord Bogue, and I also haven't observed him since that occasion. That man is one of the king's hounds." At that juncture, the king entered and stated to her, "Concerning the inquiry you were posing, that lord has vanished while seeing something. Do you know anything about it?" But Alicia deduces to herself that this king is likely the one attempting to eliminate Azure. But there's nothing we can do if the king is the culprit. He proceeds speaking, saying, "I heard you went to visit my grandfather. Why did you do that?" This king, my companion, seems extremely astute, so he might suspect something about her being a counterfeit. But Alicia remains taciturn and cannot respond. He says, "Alicia, you must answer. You shouldn't conceal secrets from your father." Still, Alicia doesn't reply, so he tells her, "All right, my dear, I will divulge a secret of my own to encourage you to tell me yours as well. In fact, Azure is a substitute for the real prince, who perished when he was a lad. It was near my birthday celebration, and I was in a cheerful mood then." He reminisces about what transpired. The boy came to him, but his father struck him forcefully in the face, stating, "Your hands are soiled. How can you come to me and touch me like this?" But the blow was so potent that it propelled him against the wall, and now his condition is progressively deteriorating, and he's on his deathbed. After that, he expired, and the king instructed them to bring him a child to take his place. His grandfather retorted, How can you be so foolish? Your heart is callous. You haven't shed a single tear for your son." At that moment, Alicia realizes to herself that the king is the perpetrator. He is the one scheming to eliminate Azure. He says to her, "Why do you gaze at me with the same expression as everyone else? Children are just individuals who share the same lineage as their parents. They are merely chess pieces for the kingdom," she responds. "Is that why you're attempting to dispose of Azure?" The king is astonished because she is very perceptive. Then she yells at him, saying, "Azure has no intention of betraying you. He only wants to support this nation. Keeping Azure close to you will make your life considerably simpler," he replies. "I know that," which irritates Alicia even further, and she shouts at him. "Then why do you desire to kill him?" He answers her, "Because I despise him. Despite lacking royal blood, he cares for this country and dedicates himself to serving it altruistically. He's so flawless, which makes me very wary, but everyone trusts him. Even my grandfather commends him profusely. He's taken renown away from me, so why should I be compared to a fraud like him? In truth, I am the king, and I don't want anyone to disregard me. It troubles me greatly that a pawn remains upon this country as my playground. I am the one who must govern it. I should not be compared to someone as insignificant as Azure." All right, my friends, describe that king with a fitting remark. Do you perceive him as a selfish and malevolent king? If you were in his position, would you assassinate Azure or let him live, despite his lack of intention to harm him? Let's return to the narrative. The king approaches. He wants to know what her story is precisely, and then he inquires of her, "Are you the impostor that Azure brought here?" Then he asks her to tell him if she does anything unwise, and Alicia becomes very tense because she fears the king will expose her just like her grandfather did. She decides to behave typically so she doesn't lose Azure and can be with him for life. She then tells him that she is Alicia, flesh and blood, and if he questions that, he can feel free to examine her. She vows that she is Alicia, even though she knows this oath has grave repercussions, but she had to lie so nothing befalls her. The king concludes the conversation and commands Alicia to depart. She informs him she will go to Galgada to wed tomorrow, as she will become their queen and the bulwark that protects Fortuna with Prince Azure. Only her eyes can see the apocalypse, and if Azure perishes under any suspicious circumstances, she will lead Galgada to become the blade that annihilates Fortuna. The king tells her that this is considered treachery against the king, and he becomes extremely irate with her because she is still a youngster. However, she will not evade this without penalty. If she perishes, he will have no method to repel Galgada. Alicia requests permission to leave, wishing him a pleasant day, and he plays with his set of shada which he sold for it then. She goes after Azure to head to Galgada for Alicia's wedding, where she will ultimately become their queen, as she is the sole individual capable of safeguarding Azure and his liberty. After that, we transition the scene to Azure and Alicia in the library studying. Azure heard that she had been keen to study recently, and she couldn't believe she was in his second chamber. Azure gave her a book replete with many beautiful illustrations. She inquires of him what is written in the book, and he informs her that this book is from lands in the west, where their language is a bit dissimilar. Then he suggests postponing the wedding to conserve time, and pledges to her that he will do something. Alicia contemplates for a moment because the diplomat hasn't yet reached Galgada. She recalls when the guard came to her room and informed her that the previous king believed there might be something she desired from him. Alicia didn't answer because everything was lucid to her grandfather. He knew the answer she would give him, and to protect Azure, so she had to depart this land without informing anyone. At that moment, Prince Azure senses that she is pondering something and asks her what's transpiring. She tells him she was just thinking about how he has many foreign articles and whether he studies from all these books, as he replies that half of them are for studying and half for enjoyment. She then requests him to take a respite. She wants to go to town together and show him around the street, as she desires him to know the location where she resided, where she dwelled. Azure accedes to that, and then he takes her to the marketplace. There Azure directs Alicia to keep her eyes concealed as they are in disguise. Alicia hears his words, but is very elated to be in the market, where she selects vegetables as she used to do previously. However, Azure purchases the vegetables and pays for what Alicia took. The two continue to roam through the market with great joy before heading to drink some very hot beverages. Afterward, Alicia inquires of him about his actual name before he became a prince. Azure informs her that he doesn't recollect it because no one has ever told him, but he senses that she desires to know something. So Alicia changes the topic and tells him that she wanted to call him a special name. He replies that she is the sole individual in the palace who calls him Azu. Alicia feels as if she has witnessed several facets of Azure today, and he asks her if they can depart. But Nina declines because there is one final location they need to visit. They then go to this place, and she says, "The boy who lay here was like a younger sibling to me. He became ill, but we didn't possess the funds to take him to a physician, so he expired. That is the star under which I was born. I detest when people say that." Azure tells her, "We need to do more than this to escape impoverishment. There is a method to do that." Nina remembers and says, "The eyes I saw when Saji sold me frightened me. They were like the eyes of a beast, glowing in the obscurity. I want to see the future of this nation that you envision." Then Nina says, "It was an enjoyable day. We should go out again." He replies, "I can't permit that all the time. Our next opportunity will be at the Autumn Harvest Festival when the city is at its peak activity." Nina thanks him for giving her something special to cling to. After that, they arrive at the palace, and everyone is astonished by Alicia's beauty, stating that the attire from Galgada suits her very well. There are also many hair adornments for her to select from, but it might be very challenging to wear them by herself. They didn't accompany her because they serve the Star Palace. It's uncommon for them to depart the country, as they are not accustomed to being in the castle at all. Alicia contemplates to herself, "I will be utterly solitary without anyone I know. I am very frightened. It feels like the ground I'm standing on is vanishing, and when I extend my hand, I find only darkness." At that moment, her little brother enters, appearing very dejected because she's departing today. "You still have 10 more days, he says. "Azure isn't here either." Alicia replies, "The former king has arranged everything because Azure is very occupied." Her brother cries, "I don't want you to go. Stay here with me perpetually unless you..." She embraces him and says, "Don't be egotistic. You won't become a great man like this. Your sister will always watch over you. As soon as I establish my authority in Galgada, I will return to see you." The servant says, "We cherished you so much. We wish we could serve you forever." Alicia thanks them while feeling very sorrowful. The scene then shifts to Azure, who is standing with his horse, suddenly sensing that something is amiss. "I feel like I've overlooked something," he thinks. Upon reaching the village, he says, "I heard you are encountering difficulty." The old man replies that the matter has been resolved. Azure is surprised and asks, "Under whose directive?" Dates answers, "Under the directive of the former king." Azure becomes very enraged with him, and Dates replies, "It's for the benefit of the country." Azure takes his horse and rides off, saying that's what was troubling him. Nina was acting peculiarly. "My diplomat went to inspect the countryside abruptly, instead of returning to all this. The objective is to keep me away, but who did this? Was it you, Nina, or not?" The scene transitions to Nina, who is in the carriage, saying, "Azure must be very furious right now. I had no alternative. I couldn't let him stop me." Nina weeps, saying, "I want him to hasten and stop me. I don't want to go, and I want to see Azure one last time." After that, we see Azure evading the village guard, wishing that Nina would await him. Both Azure and Nina feel sorrowful and weep. Then the scene shifts to Bastia in the region of Galgada, where the prince is preparing his attire and everything to welcome Princess Alicia.